Chen had spent a decade making herself invisible. Oversized cardigans that swallowed her frame, glasses with thick black frames that hid her eyes, hair pulled back so severely it gave her headaches, and shoes that squeaked with every step. She dressed like someone who wanted to disappear, and for 10 years it worked. No one looked twice at the mousy accountant in the corner office of Chen and Associates, the mid-sized firm her late father had built from nothing. But invisibility had been her armor, her protection, her sacrifice. What no one knew, what no one could know, was that Chen was worth $47 million. Old money, carefully invested, growing silently in offshore accounts and diversified portfolios. Money that could have bought her designer clothes, a penthouse apartment, exotic vacations, and the kind of life most people only dreamed about. Instead, she lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, took the subway to work, and brought leftovers for lunch in containers she'd been reusing for years. Because 10 years ago, Maya had made a promise to her dying father. "Take care of them," he'd whispered, his calloused hand gripping hers with surprising strength for a man slipping away. "The employees, their families. They gave me everything. Promise me, Maya. Promise me you'll protect them," she had promised. And she had kept that promise through creative accounting, personal loans disguised as company bonuses, anonymous scholarships for employees' children, and medical bill payments that appeared as accounting errors in people's favor. Her inheritance had dwindled from 70 million to 47, but 23 employees and their families had survived recessions, medical emergencies, and personal catastrophes they never would have weathered alone. The ugly clothes, the invisible existence, it was all part of the plan. If people knew she had money, they'd ask questions. They'd wonder why she was working at all. They'd discover the ghost in the machine, the silent guardian redistributing wealth one crisis at a time. So Chen became a woman no one noticed, no one desired, no one suspected of anything more than mediocrity, until Alexander Hunt bought the company. The news came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by the outgoing CEO with apologetic eyes and nervous hands. A corporate buyout, restructuring inevitable, jobs uncertain. Maya watched her colleagues' faces crumble, watched 23 families' security evaporate, and felt the weight of her father's promise crush her chest. Alexander Hunt arrived 3 days later like a storm front, 6 feet 2 inches of calculated power in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 34, he was already legendary. A self-made billionaire who'd turned a failing tech startup into an empire, known for ruthless efficiency and a mind that could spot waste from a mile away. Maya kept her head down during his first walkthrough, her hideous brown cardigan wrapped tight, her outdated glasses sliding down her nose. She'd researched him obsessively the past 3 nights. Alexander Hunt cut fat without mercy. He'd laid off hundreds in previous acquisitions, optimized operations until they bled efficiency, and walked away billions richer while communities crumbled. She had to protect her people. Whatever it took. "Miss Chen," his voice cut through her spinning thoughts. She looked up to find him standing at her cubicle, his steel-gray eyes studying her with unnerving intensity. "I need the financial records for the past decade. All of them, on my desk by Monday." Her blood froze. 10 years of creative accounting, of carefully hidden transfers and conveniently explained discrepancies, all about to be laid bare before a man famous for seeing through deception. "Of course, Mr. Hunt," she managed, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. She spent the weekend preparing 2 sets of records, the real ones, and sanitized versions that might possibly withstand scrutiny. She didn't sleep. She barely ate, and Monday morning she delivered both sets to his office, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped them. "Stay," he said when she turned to leave. For 3 hours, Alexander Hunt reviewed her files while Maya sat in increasingly uncomfortable silence, watching her life's work, her father's legacy, her secret mission, examined by eyes that missed nothing. She watched his jaw tighten, watched his fingers tap an increasingly agitated rhythm on his desk, watched the moment he discovered the truth. "You've been embezzling from this company for 10 years, he said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. "No." The word escaped before she could stop it. "I've been saving it." He looked up, those gray eyes sharp enough to cut. "Explain." So she did. Everything poured out. her father's deathbed promise, the employees she'd protected, the medical bills and tuition payments and mortgage rescues, the secret inheritance she'd spent keeping families afloat, the invisibility she'd cultivated to hide in plain sight. She showed him the other files, the real ones, documenting every penny she'd given, every crisis she'd averted. "Sarah Martinez's daughter has leukemia," she said, her voice breaking. "The treatments aren't covered by insurance. She would have died 3 years ago. James Wong's wife needed a kidney transplant they couldn't afford. Robert Harrison's son got a full scholarship to MIT from an anonymous donor. I've kept 23 families alive. Mr. Hunt, that's not embezzlement. That's humanity." When she finished, silence filled the room like water. Alexander Hunt studied her for a long moment, and Maya couldn't read his expression. Finally, he stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "You have $47 million left," he said. "You could have walked away at any time, lived any life you wanted." "Why didn't you?" "Because my father asked me to care, and because they deserve someone who will." He turned, and something in his face had changed, softened. "My father was a factory worker," he said quietly. "He got cancer when I was 12. His boss fired him for missing too much work, and we lost everything, our house, our insurance, our savings. He died in a county hospital, alone, because we couldn't afford to all be there." His voice roughened. "I built my empire swearing I'd never be that powerless again. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was fighting for. I became the boss who fires people, the man who prioritizes profit over people." He walked back to his desk, picked up her files, and did something Maya never expected. He smiled. "Chen and Associates doesn't need restructuring," he said. "It needs expansion. I'm investing $50 million into this company. With one condition, you become the CEO, real CEO, not just in name. And together we're going to build something that proves profit and humanity aren't mutually exclusive." Maya stared at him, speechless. "Also," he added, and now there was warmth in those gray eyes, "you don't have to dress like that anymore, unless you want to." "But Maya, can I call you Maya? I didn't fall for the cardigan. I fell for the person who'd sacrifice everything, including her own happiness, to keep a promise to her father and protect people who never even knew they needed protecting." 3 months later, Maya wore her first designer dress to the company gala, not because, Alexander asked, but because she finally felt free to be herself. They announced the new Employee Support Fund, established in her father's name, backed by Alexander's fortune and her own remaining inheritance. Every employee and their families would have full medical coverage, education support, and emergency assistance. Sarah Martinez's daughter, now in remission, gave a speech that left the entire room in tears. As Maya stood on stage next to Alexander, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently, she realized her father's promise hadn't just saved 23 families. It had saved her too, from a life of empty wealth and meaningless luxury. And it had transformed a billionaire who'd forgotten his humanity. She'd dressed ugly for 10 years to hide her heart. But love, real love, had found it anyway, because true beauty was never about clothes or appearances. It was about showing up, keeping promises, and believing that one person's kindness could change everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewarded that kind of beauty with its own miracle.